Alright, I think it's time to do a video on a game that actually came out fairly recently. So let's talk about the game I've been playing relentlessly for about a month and a half now. Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. You might have picked this up in my Zone of the Enders videos, but I am something of a Kojima-phile. The Metal Gear series is very close to my heart. That said, the reason you're seeing this video now as opposed to within the week of release when I completed the story is because I wanted to try to get as close to 100% of the game as I could while I developed a rational, real, thought-out opinion about it. Keep in mind there will be no spoilers here. I respect the game enough and it is new enough that I want to try to keep people's minds clean. It's really difficult to avoid certain spoilers for this game, so I want to at least do my part. Things start off, they're really engaging. I was hooked on it from the beginning. The central conflict and the villain for this story, I thought that they were pretty interesting, and I felt a lot of empathy for Big Boss over the course of the story and the situation that he's found himself in. There aren't as many twists and turns as your average Metal Gear story, but it's well paced and it has a lot of great moments in it that I really enjoyed. I haven't really been this thrilled with a video game story in a while. The climax of Chapter 1 in particular was very cathartic. But the problems start shortly after that. The real issue is that this story just shouldn't have been divided into chapters. Chapter 2 is essentially just the post-game, with additional cutscenes that kind of wrap up the various character arcs. So when you get there, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of focus, and that could be because of cut content. We know for a fact that a very important mission in Chapter 2 didn't make it into the final game, and that causes a lot of build-up in a certain character's arc to end up being totally worthless, because it just doesn't go anywhere. That leads me to believe that it was cut pretty late in development. The conspiracy theorist in me wants to say that it's around the time the public learned Kojima and his company were getting disbanded. Maybe they sacrificed that mission for the sake of polishing the rest of the experience. Maybe that critical plot point was the cost. I really can't say. Some people have been a lot more critical regarding the story, and I understand where they're coming from, but I just don't feel as strongly. Most of my gripes are with the unfocused nature of Chapter 2, but besides that, I actually think the cutscenes this time around could have been longer. That's partially a testament to how well they're shot and acted and just presented. There's a lot of intensity you can tell in these characters, but they don't interact for long enough. And that's partially because Kojima was going for the Mad Max vibe, and he totally nailed it. But I just think people could have talked more. There's a lot of cassette tapes you can listen to for exposition. It would have been cool if some of those were just parts of the cutscenes instead. Some really important stuff is on those tapes. It's never going to be as fun listening to an audio cassette tape of exposition as it would to watch the characters learn this information. So if we're judging this strictly by story, I don't think this Metal Gear game would stack as high as the first 3 games, because I just don't think it's as well realized, but it's by no means bad compared to some of the other story-driven games that have come out lately. What really shines here is the gameplay. It's hands down the best in the series, and it's gotta be the smartest action game I've played in a long time, maybe even ever. The open nature of the areas and the tons of variables you gotta work with, they just gel wonderfully, with missions designed so well that they're just begging you to replay them for a better rank, or to complete those side objectives, or just to see if you can pull off some crazy idea, and that is always the most satisfying thing in the world when that goes the way you want it to. Phantom Pain is an absolute thrill to play because of the fact that it caters to and encourages multiple playstyles in such a natural way, but at the same time, the game's really good at kicking the crutch out from under the players. When you find something that works a little too well, the enemies will receive new gear to deal with it. Sniping quickly became my preferred method of dealing with enemies, but then the guards started wearing bulletproof armor and riot shields, helmets, all this stuff that forced me to either sneak past them completely or get up close and personal. And there's plenty of other handicaps like gas masks or night vision, and they can really mix things up. It's easy to remove these factors, but playing with them on can make for an interesting self-imposed challenge, so I'd recommend you try that out. That doesn't mean that the game isn't already pretty tough. Trying to 100% this game has been a lot of fun, but it does expose a few wrinkles in the scoring system that I'm a bit conflicted over. It's not quite as strict as the one in Ground Zeroes, possibly to encourage replayability. While completing a mission super fast will still allow you to get an S S rank, even if you get spotted. The fact that you are no longer penalized for each and every kill means that you can get away with abusing reflex mode and headshots assuming you're good enough. Fortunately, this strategy only really works when going for S ranks on a few missions, but there were times when I felt that I'd do poorly and was shocked to earn an A because of things like this. It's a little odd because Phantom Pain is not a game where it's easy to be competent. There's a lot of things you gotta learn in the field and just as much going on with the base development side of things. So let's talk about review scores. Logically, since this game got a lot of perfect scores, it's a perfect game, right? No, of course not. There's always going to be some kind of flaws. Aside from incomplete story elements and the narrative being a little fragmented, there's sometimes things like the draw distance being a little poor, some of the side ops are more generic than I would have liked. There's also those animal capture cages that really just should not exist. But I'm being totally honest when I say that this is absolutely the best game I've played all year. I would highly recommend it. It's an essential for anyone who has a PS4 or an Xbox One. If you're not familiar with Metal Gear Solid, catching up on the plot to play this one, it's really not as hard as you'd think. You gotta be familiar with the story of Snake Eater, Peace Walker, and then just play Ground Zeroes. Anybody curious about this game who's not big on the franchise, just try Ground Zeroes. Phantom Pain is a bigger, better version of that game, so if you like the gameplay experience of it, you will like Phantom Pain. I haven't joined the 100% Club just yet, but I'm confident they'll get there soon. The reality is that this game is just a hugely enjoyable time sink for me. It's the kind of game I've wanted to play for years. The Metal Gear series has been around for almost 3 decades, and Kojima has made a huge impact on the industry. While super fans like myself might debate where this game stands in terms of the lore and everything, I can confidently say that the tactical espionage experience built up in those decades has reached its peak in this final game.